Not only does every fighter want to be the best, they want to be loved doing it. But over the years, a select few embraced the hate and used it to fuel their careers. Today, we look at the fighters that channeled their inner Ric Flair, and in doing so, transformed their legacy beyond recognition. Some good, others, well, not so much. Welcome to the INC, and these are 5 of MMA's biggest heels. Very few fighters have embraced their inner heeldom more in recent years than Colby Covington. Covington was signed by the UFC following his success as an NCAA All-American. But despite amassing a 12-1 record, his quiet persona and dull fighting style meant he was often overlooked for high-profile matches. In 2017, Covington took on former title challenger Demian Maia in the co-main of Fight Night Sao Paulo. Covington gave a star-making performance to dominate the jiu-jitsu legend, but it was his actions after the fight that garnered all the headlines.
Brazil, you're a dog! All you filthy animals suck! I got one thing to say! Tyrell Woodley, I'm coming for you! If you don't answer the front door, I'm gonna knock it in and I'm gonna take what's mine! That welterweight belt!
From then on, Covington took on the role of UFC supervillain, irking fans and fighters with brazen trash talk, social media stunts, and his outspoken support of then-President Donald Trump. A combination which made the Californian the most talked-about fighter in the sport. While the shtick raised Covington's profile, it wasn't without controversy. After beating Robbie Lawler at Fight Night Newark, Covington came under fire for mocking the near-fatal train crash of Lawler's longtime friend, Matt Hughes, while former training partner Jorge Masvidal cited Covington's behavior as the reason for his departures from American Top Team. The man himself, however, claimed the villain persona was born from necessity.
They had told my manager, Dan Lambert, that they weren't going to re-sign me. They didn't like my style. They didn't like that I wasn't entertaining. And this is before I really started to become an entertainer and understand the entertainment aspect of this business. So I go and shoot this promo, and I wasn't supposed to have my job, but that promo goes so viral on the internet that the UFC's like, we have to keep him. We have to re-sign him because that promo was so big.
Covington's notoriety gave him the high-profile matches he long sought, culminating at UFC 225 when he beat Rafael dos Anjos to win the interim welterweight title. By this point, fans looked for anyone to halt the Colby Express, and it came from an unlikely source.
Him trying to put
Despite a second loss to Kamaru Usman 2 years later, Covington remains one of the sport's most notorious fighters, and all eyes will be on the chaotic one again when he faces longtime rival Masvidal at UFC 272. Chael Sonnen remains the benchmark for MMA's budding heels. Much like Covington, Sonnen spent his early career overlooked because of his wrestling-heavy style. After being released from the UFC with a 1-2 record, Sonnen bounced between Bodog and WEC before returning to the promotion in 2009, by which point his mouth had replaced his hands as his strongest weapon.
Anderson Silva, you absolutely suck!
Sonnen later claimed his heel turn was to stand out in a competitive middleweight division, suggesting so many fighters were fixated on playing the good guy, it left an opening for an antagonist. While Covington thrived on outright controversy, Sonnen's heel character was a wisecracking anti-hero, his natural charisma and sense of humor shielding some of his more barbed comments, with Vanderlei Silva and Minotauro Nogueira as two of his most high-profile targets.
There was a bus that pulled up to a red light, and Little Nog tried to feed it a carrot while Big Nog was petting it. He thought it was a horse. This really happened. Do you believe me that happened?
Not really.
He tried to feed a bus a carrot, and now you're telling me that country has computers?
Sonnen's most devious acts, however, came outside the cage, testing positive for steroids on 3 separate occasions, and being sentenced to 2 years probation for his part in a real estate money laundering scam. Despite numerous setbacks, Sonnen's ability to sell a fight meant he was always one step away from a marquee matchup. This was most evident at UFC 159, when he was given a light heavyweight title shot against Jon Jones. This despite Sonnen not fighting in the class for 8 years and coming off of a middleweight title loss to Anderson Silva. By the time he started winding down his career, Sonnen had transferred his gift of gab into a successful media role, becoming one of the few men to work for both Bellator and the UFC simultaneously, as well as founding his successful grappling promotion, Submission Underground. A potential opening as a Vince McMahon boss has been surprisingly unfilled. Tito Ortiz is known these days for his gaffes on the mic, but there was once a time the Californian's motor mouth made him one of the sport's biggest stars. A 2-time state amateur wrestling champion, Ortiz made his MMA debut in 1997, quickly rising through the rankings to win the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship. But his notoriety was formed long before finding MMA gold. Ortiz was open about his fandom of pro wrestling, and borrowed heavily from the genre as a means of selling his fights. A brash, swaggering asshole, more than happy to insult his opponents before and after a fight. When Zuffa purchased the UFC in 2001, Ortiz was positioned as the company's figurehead, a counterculture star who could not only talk a big fight, but back it up in the cage. Appropriately, Ortiz's heeldom was most effective against a guy with wrestling connections of his own. After beating Lions Den veterans Guy Mesger and Jerry Bolander, Ortiz began a feud with MMA legend Ken Shamrock, forcing Ken Shamrock to come out of retirement and face Ortiz in a high-profile grudge match at UFC 40, a fight later cited by Big John McCarthy as one of the most important in MMA history. As the decade rolled on, Ortiz's heel character started losing relevance, going winless in 5 fights and wildly mocked for his post-loss excuses. Even his legendary motor mouth had started failing him.
Well, here we are with Geraldo Babalu. You did an awesome job. So what? You're a black belt in jiu-jitsu, getting an awesome submission there. I want to tell me what you see. Let's go ahead and see by the fight what you saw in the ring.
Ortiz's losing streak got so bad, it led to a brief face turn prior to a match with Ryan Bader at UFC 132, where Ortiz managed to roll back the years and claim his first win since 2006.
Trying to jump up. It's all over. It's all over. Tito Ortiz has beaten Ryan Bader.
Henry Cejudo's heel turn is not only the most obvious in MMA, but arguably the most effective. On paper, Cejudo should have been the quintessential babyface, a second-generation migrant who overcame poverty to win gold at the 2008 Olympics. Despite climbing the ranks of the UFC flyweight division, Cejudo maintained the dignity expected of his background, even singing the praise of MMA legend Demetrius Johnson after beating him for the flyweight title at UFC 227. In January 2019, Cejudo defended his title against bantamweight champion TJ Dillashaw. The flyweight division had often been under fire due to a lack of media-friendly personalities, and many speculated the UFC were using a Dillashaw win to justify closing the weight class. The threat sparked a change in Cejudo's persona. Starting with the Dillashaw fight, Cejudo became more open to embracing the show side of the sport, bringing out props at pre-fight face-offs and being more outspoken on social media, albeit with a tongue-in-cheek demeanor that embraced the dorky elements of his personality. Henry Cejudo was dead. Long live the king of cringe.
And Triple C went on to become rich and famous, and he became the greatest combat athlete of all time. The end.
Cejudo's heel turn had an immediate impact. His increased media presence along with a win over Dillashaw were cited as the reasons for the UFC reversing its decisions to axe the flyweight division. While Cejudo used his new star to claim a second title after beating Marlon Moraes at UFC 238. Not all of Cejudo's stunts proved positive. After beating Dominic Cruz at UFC 249, Cejudo abruptly announced his retirement from the sport, spending the following years attempting to leverage a match with featherweight king Alex Volkanovski, only for UFC President Dana White to shut down the idea on multiple occasions.
He's retired, isn't he? I mean, the last time I saw he was retired. And now he's mad that he didn't get a title shot? That doesn't even make sense. In a different weight class? It doesn't make sense.
The retired Cejudo currently boasts a 16-2 record and can still be found clogging up social media posts to this day. Jon Jones is one of the biggest heels in MMA history, even if he won't admit it. Early in his career, Jones presented himself as the epitome of a babyface, an upstanding family man who attributed his success to hard work and clean living. Despite former teammate Rashad Evans telling his fans that Jones' persona was a complete facade.
And I just say what I say about him being fake because Jon is not the person that, he says he is or tries to pretend he is to be. He's setting himself up for a fall that I don't think he can take right now.
The first signs of a heel turn came at UFC 151, when Jones's refusal to face a short-notice Chael Sonnen led to the event being cancelled, with Dana White describing Jones's actions as the most selfish he'd ever seen. The saga marked the first time the UFC framed Jones in a villainous light, one further amplified by his arrest for driving under the influence a few months earlier. Jones continued to be embroiled in scandals in the years after, from multiple post-fight drug tests to being arrested for a hit-and-run incident in 2015. But despite mounting evidence, he continued presenting himself as a wholesome role model, often writing off his outside controversies as tests of faith. If anything, it was Jon's unwillingness to accept his heeldom that actually led him to becoming one in the eyes of the fans. Think of him as a less charismatic Kurt Angle.
How come this is the third time we're actually taking focus from the fighters and the fights and talking about what you have in your body, whether it's a picogram or a pictogram? Why have you tested now positive?
Next question, please. Thank you.
Oh, wow.
In his later years, Jon actually began embracing the villainous side of his character. After being criticized for his repeated eye pokes against Glover Teixeira, Jones released a video on Instagram in which he mocked fan uproar to his actions. A trick he repeated 7 years later when he seemingly made light of his recent arrest on domestic violence charges. How many times can God test an individual? Tell us, Jon. Tell us. Jones hasn't fought since a controversial win over Dominic Reyes, but should the former champion return to action, it won't be as a conquering hero. And now, time for a few honorable mentions. Ronda Rousey had one of the highest profile heel turns when she refused to shake Miesha Tate's hand at UFC 168.
Wow, she went to shake Ronda's hand and Ronda walked away from her.
Ben Askren made up for his technical shortcomings by being one of the sport's best ever talkers. Joanna Jędrzejczyk tried playing heel on The Ultimate Fighter against Claudia Gadelha, the key word being tried.
More respect to the champion.
More respect for me.
Yeah?
You should respect me.
You've got enough respect.
Do it.
No, I'm gonna wait.
Do
and
it.
enjoy it slowly.
Do it.
Slowly, day by day.
This better not awaken anything in me.
Hey, this is the INC. Please like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a video.